Hi, welcome to the Seth Campbell podcast. This show is to equip you with real world tactics to improve your leadership skills, build your wealth, and cause you to leave a multi-generational impact on your world. My name is Seth Campbell, and I'm excited to speak to you today. I'm going to continue our conversation. We are in episode 9. I'm going to continue where I left off on episode 8, which was called The Science of Execution. So episode 9 is going to be the Science of Execution part 2. And we're going to jump into accountability. So this will be about the accountability cadence. And I got to tell you, this is a very frequent challenge that leaders face. And by the way, remember our definition of leadership is it pretty much applies to everybody because we all have influence. We all have people that we influence, that we lead, whether it is as a parent, as a significant other to somebody, somewhere around. People are watching us, people are influenced by us, so we must learn leadership skills. That's why these lessons apply to everything. And you will find that the accountability cadence in the Science of Execution Part 2 absolutely applies to every part of your life, including parenting and all those other ones. This is, by now you've probably learned that I'm a visual person and I like to speak in visual. So now a lot of people are going to hear this podcast on Apple Podcast or Spotify or Google, all the different podcast networks that we're on. And I would encourage you to take adequate notes. And I'm going to speak in some drawings. Today's not going to be too complicated. Don't worry about that. And if you do want to see some visuals, we do record this actually, and you will be able to watch it. All you need to do is go to our Facebook group, which is actually currently titled Mind Bending Leadership. It will be changed to Seth Campbell Podcast soon. And just find us on there and we will be able to connect you with the video and you'll be able to see this. So now let's jump into the Science of Execution Part 2. Here's the visual I want you to draw. I want you to imagine 2 dials. Think about the old stereo knob, or my current stereo has it, where you turn up the knob, or the old TV sets, channels 1 through 10. A lot of people don't know what I'm talking about when I say that, but you turn the knob and you turn up the volume, or you turn down the volume. You turn up the music, the intensity, you turn it down. So I want you to picture these 2 dials, these 2 knobs, so to speak. And one of them is called content and the other one is called frequency. And one of the greatest leadership lessons I've learned is how and when to control those 2 dials. And when do I turn up the content? When do I turn it down? When do I turn up the frequency? When do I turn it down? This becomes one of the crucial arts of execution at a very high level. And let's jump into it and let's just cover some of the real basic scenarios and then give some maybe examples of how this might show up in your world. And what you'll find as a leader, you might be challenged right now with, man, I'm really struggling to know what to say to people, when to say it. Some of my people are slipping out of performance. I want to avoid those conversations, or I want to run to those conversations. I'm not really sure what to do. And I'll walk through where we tend to fall off track at different levels of an organization. Because what you will find, and we talk about this often here, is that every organization, every team, every group, every family goes through cycles. And if you go back to the business world, you'll see the startup stage, then you'll see some friction when there's some success. We grew so fast, a lot of things started to get complicated and we are tripping over ourselves, and there's, it's still a little bit entrepreneurial, a little bit making deals and inconsistent. Then you'll see that's where a lot of companies get stuck. They can push through that. Like we talked about on last week's episode 8 on Science of Execution, we talked about the 3 roles, that the visionary, the operator, and the processor. When they bring in a processor to the head of the table, not to the head of the table, but sitting at the big table, not all the processors just do processing and nobody really has a say, but this lead processor style person that does have a say in the company, that is empowered, that is at the executive level or leadership level, what have you, the big table in the room. When those 3 personalities are sitting at that table, then you tend to see a company go to the next stage, which they start installing systems, they start having rules, they start having budgets, they start having approval systems. Drives the early stage people a little bit crazy because it does feel bureaucratic, and it is bureaucratic. And then that company can continue going through different stages. They could stay there and do very well. They could actually become too bureaucratic and too much red tape, which we've seen government go there before, and then things just don't move. So companies, teams, groups, nonprofits, families go through stages. And during different stages and people's different levels of employment, you'll interact with this accountability cadence where one size doesn't fit all. And if you felt that way, man, I can't seem to find like our accountability cadence, or it doesn't seem to work, or the one I use seems to wear off or get stale or stop being effective, take a breath. That's normal. That's supposed to happen. There is not a single accountability cadence that is appropriate for all size companies everywhere. And this is the stuff that, man, I wish somebody would have taught me earlier in my career, which is why we have this Seth Campbell podcast. This is from real world lessons and learnings. So let's talk about, I'm going to give you 3 very basic stages of these 2 dials, content and frequency. And remember, there's going to be a lot of variations in here, but these are the big 3, and then talk through what's appropriate, what's inappropriate. And then for those of you who have the opportunity of being on video with us, you'll be able to see this. For everybody else listening, you'll be able to follow along. So this first stage, we're going to call this, remember, 2 dials, content and frequency. The content dial is high. So it's high content and the frequency is low. By the way, those you don't want to violate. When content is high, frequency must be low. And let's explain that. So high content, that means a lot of content. That means in the business world, you're very detailed. I've heard this great analogy. I believe it was from 4 Disciplines of Execution, which is an incredible subject matter if you ever want to take that. And they talk about these 2 scoreboards, right? And there's the regular scoreboard, like a sports game, where you can see right up on the screen how much content is on the main scoreboard of a sports game. It's actually not that much. Like the home team has this many points, the away team has this many points, there's this much time on the clock, and we're in this quarter or this period. That's about it. That's a very good scoreboard. And then there's something that they coined the phrase, I believe it's called the Coaches Scoreboard, which then if you went and looked at the coaches, scoreboard or clipboard or computer now, you'd see a ton of stats on there. There would be a lot of content. There would be like, and that's the stuff that we hear the color commentators say, oh, this person has this many sacks, or this many yards, this many runs, or this many hits, or this is their batting average, and this and that against left-handed pitchers, right-handed pitchers. This very detailed amount of content. Which one is more important? They're both important. However, the purpose of the main scoreboard is I can look at it in about 3 seconds to know if I'm winning or losing. Do your people need that? Yes. Yes. What if we turn that off and all we had was coaches' scoreboards? How long would you keep watching that game? If all you had was that clipboard, how long would you watch the game? How, as a fan, how interested would you be? As a player, how interested would you be? At some point, your eyes would just gravitate towards, am I winning or losing? Am I winning or losing? What if that wasn't even on there? What if it was hard to find? What if it took you 14 screens to get to, am I winning or losing? Then you'd be out. Your performance would degrade. And this is what happens in organizations if they try to match high content with high frequency. In other words, I have tons of data to look at, and that's what I look at every single day or all the time. Like all I have access to is an enormous amount of data. This happens when organizations, like I talked about that stages, when they go too far, where the processor at the head processor table may have created those coaches scoreboards, and you have a ton of spreadsheets, you have a ton of just raw data, which is all super valuable, but yet that's all you see. And I see that happen in our world. I see that happen in the companies I've been involved with. Inevitably, the spreadsheet person takes over, and it's really cool at the beginning, but then that's all we have, and performance degrade. And that is because somebody has violated this. They have created high content, tons of content, and high frequency. That's what I operate off of daily. You can't do that. It's always when content is high, frequency must be low. Content high, frequency low. Now, there are some roles that will need to look at tons of data on a daily basis. That is going to be very role specific. It's rare. It actually is rare. I know some people out there, no, the high processor must be able to look at all that data every day. Trust me, they don't have to look at all that data every day. The project they're working on, I guarantee you there is an 80-20 rule. There's 20% of the data matters most to what they need to achieve that day. And they could just look at that. So remember, high content, how's my frequency? So if my team is underperforming right now, or something in my life is underperforming, am I actually looking at too much data every day? Have I lost track of the one number, the big metric that moves all metrics? Or do I remember what that is, but all of our meetings involve talking about everything else? Then what you're doing is you're violating. You're bringing high content into a higher frequency. Can't do that. So whenever you go to deeper content, so that would be like financials, that would be detailed trends, that would be strategic stuff, that would be analysis, that would be the research, the deeper things, looking at a lot of stuff. Save those for like monthly. Go through the deeper profit and loss statement monthly. Yeah, you might need to look at some of it weekly. However, the deeper strategy, the deeper trends, monthly, quarterly, annually. High content, low frequency. Probably some of you out there are relating to this right now. Oh my gosh, we have let our spreadsheets get out of control. Maybe you haven't. Maybe you just need to look at them less. Maybe you need to just save those for the monthly meeting or the quarterly analysis or the once a year deep dive. That's fine. Nothing wrong with content, nothing wrong with a lot of data, but you will not cause productivity by looking at it every day. You'll get lost. So now let's turn the dials a little bit. And for those of you who have the video, you'll see my graphics. I actually make the little dials turn. You're welcome. And for those of you who are listening on the podcast, here's what I did is I went medium. So I'm turning the dials. Now we're turning the content down to medium and we're going to go medium frequency. This is a really good place to be. This is actually one of the more skipped ones, believe it or not. You would think that this one is the most common. It's not. Usually, so let's look at it this way. Frequency, when we say medium frequency, we're talking weekly. What do we usually see organizations do weekly? They either don't talk about anything, or they try to do high content too much, or they try to do low content, which would be just talking about like leading indicators. So let's have a quick sidebar on what is a leading indicator. So leading indicator is the activity that must be done to achieve your goal. For example, if we're talking about weight loss, a leading indicator for the nutrition. So if we're talking about weight loss, then let's say I'm going to analyze and I set goals around my nutrition and my exercise. A leading indicator on nutrition is going to be counting my calories. It's going to be tracking my food. It's the activity I do early in the process. And then a real-time indicator is going to be maybe my total caloric ins and outs. It might be my weight, and then my lag indicator. So it's leading, real-time, lag, beginning, middle, end, leading, real-time, lag. My lag indicator, my ending indicator might be either my weight or my body fat percentage, depending on kind of what that fitness goal was, or running the marathon under X number of minutes. That could be actually my lag measure. That's my goal. And my real-time indicator could be getting into a certain body weight or body fat, et cetera, et cetera. So now on content, when we're on medium content, medium frequency, I'm going to look at the beginning and middle. I'm going to look at my lead indicators and my real-time indicators. So if we're in sales, my leading indicators, what are leading indicators for sales? That's going to be like calls, contacts, maybe appointments. It's going to be the lead generation, the prospecting. And if I'm setting appointments, it may actually be signatures, depending on how that sales process works of where I'm at. Maybe I get an order signed, yet the product hasn't been delivered, they haven't paid for it, it's not done yet. Or I have the work order done, or they have hired me to install the flooring, but I haven't done it yet. That could be a real-time indicator, like I have the signature. So leading indicators are going to be prospecting, calls, contacts, lead generation, appointment set. Real-time indicators are going to either be like the appointment set or the signatures gotten. It's going to be right there. And then lag indicators are going to be, it's done, I got the closing, I got the sale, whatever. So now on medium content, we actually, this is weekly, medium content, medium frequency. We do not want to talk about closings. We do not want to talk about income. We do not want to talk about lag indicators. We don't want to talk about results. We don't want to talk about the weight or our run time or our body fat. Weekly, we want to look at the leading indicators and the real-time indicators. How many calls, how many appointments, how many calories in and out this last week, how many exercise minutes, whatever it may be. We're going to look at leading indicators and real-time indicators only. And the problem is when organizations grow, they just creep in. We should also look at this. We should also look at this. Why don't we add this to the weekly meeting? Let's also look at this. Let's also, and before you know it, they've actually broken the rule and they've dialed content high, medium frequency. It will kill your productivity. It will kill your ability to hold people accountable. And why is that? It's because when you're holding me accountable and you give me the opportunity to talk about everything, I'm going to talk about everything and I'm going to accomplish nothing. I'm going to find a way out of the number that I really am embarrassed about or need to hit. And not because I'm a bad person, it's just human nature. And I'm going to gravitate towards one I'm okay with. And is it possible if you give me 5 different numbers to talk about, that 3 of those 5 may not actually cause me to hit my goal? Is that possible? Sure it is. I'll probably talk about one of those 3. However, if weekly, I'm talking about 2 numbers that are inescapable for me hitting my goal, you're probably keeping me on track. You're probably doing me a favor. You're probably holding me accountable, achievable, and focused on what's going to cause me to really break through, especially if I'm stuck. Don't let me talk about any other number but those 2 numbers. If I didn't have enough appointments, I didn't get enough signatures, don't let me talk about something else because I need your coaching, your support, your consulting. I need you to maybe help me have a breakthrough with that and not talk about anything else, no matter how important, how urgent, how on fire it appears. So medium content is a leading indicator and a real-time indicator, and we're going to do that weekly. And then the final, big picture zone is when we continue the dials and we lower the content all the way down and we really increase the frequency to daily. So this is going to be high frequency. So I'm probably having a conversation daily. So if I was going to talk to somebody daily, I've got to narrow down really low content. And we're just going to talk about lead indicators. How many appointments you get today? How many calls you make today? Tell me about yesterday. Whenever that, if it's at the end of the day, tell me what happened. If it's the beginning of the day, tell me what happened yesterday. And in just one category, I did all that. Let's set up a separate meeting to talk about all the other stuff. I really need your advice on this. I really need to make a decision, but okay, that's cool. Set up a separate meeting. I'm a big fan of this meeting already has its content defined. If you want to add content, just set up another meeting. By the way, another meeting might be as soon as I've done that before to people, like, we're going to hang up this call and then call me right back. And I know that's weird and I am weird, but it is like keeping the purity of the content of what we were supposed to talk about for that meeting. This meeting is only to talk about how many dials you made. This means only to talk about how many contacts you made. This means only to talk about how many appointments you made. If you need another answer or talk about something else, cool. Set up another meeting, which literally could be as soon as we hang up from this, we'll call right back. The content of this stays pure. And can you realize how inescapable it is to ultimately, this conversation is only about how many calories you ate yesterday or your food log, nothing else. I didn't feel, okay, cool. Let's have another conversation about that. Let's go through item by item and let's do that. Now, if there is such a thing as a higher frequency, that might be an hourly check-in. This is if people are really sliding off. So here, now you can start to see how you change these dials. So for example, somebody is crushing their numbers. They're so reliable. They're always hitting it. They're having no issues at all. I'm a fan of lower frequency. If they're self-managed, self-motivated, and achieving results, and I'm more sounding board, okay, cool. we're going to lower the frequency to weekly, to bi-weekly, to once a month, heck, once a quarter. I had one of my old bosses a long time ago. I had one text message from that guy every quarter, a text message, because I was crushing goals so much. And he knew I'd reach out to him if I need him. So it was fine, really low frequency. But when we had that once a quarter text message, and then every 6 months we had like a meeting where I put together like a million slides. It was so much content. I don't even know if he paid attention, but that was necessary because of strategy and all of that. So now if somebody's starting to slide, then I'm like, okay, cool. Let's check in every week now. And here's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at your contacts, and we're going to look at your appointments and your signatures every single week. And I'm going to go real detailed. I'm going to go name by name. I'm going to get so specific that there can be no hiding. So when we look at your phone calls, I don't want to see a number. I don't want to see 12 calls. I want to see Mary Smith, John Doe. And I'm going to literally ask you 5 or 6 questions about Mary Smith. What did she say? What was her challenge? What was your response to that? Tell me something I don't know about Mary that might be cool. Oh, you don't know? So maybe you didn't build rapport. Let me coach you on how to do that. You didn't connect. What was the solution you have to her challenge? Okay, that seems pretty surface. It doesn't sound like that's really the solution. Let me coach you on that. Okay, when's the next appointment? Oh, you didn't set a next appointment. Oh, we always set a next appointment before we finish this appointment. So now go back and work on that, and I'll talk to you next week, and we'll go name by name. So do you see how I'm going to do that? Now, if the person's still not succeeding, I'm probably, okay, cool. I'm coming in closer. I'm increasing the frequency. Let's talk every morning. And here's all we're going to talk about is your conversations that day. Like, I'm actually not going to want to know about your appointments. I want to know about your conversations on the phone, or I want to know about your appointment setting, whatever the very lead indicator is. Oh, but I had a closing today, or I had this. I got to say, okay, that's cool. That's not what this means about. This means about your conversations, your lead indicators. That's it. And we're in and out. And I'm going to go detailed. I'm going to hear name by name. I think it's the same name you said yesterday. So that's actually not a new conversation, is it? No, it's not. Okay, cool. So what's your goal then today for new conversations? All right, 3. Okay, cool. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Next day. Hey, what are the 3 names? How'd it go? Tell me something about them. What was their challenge? What was this? What was that? What was that? Do you see how that goes? Now the person starts to get back on track. They've had their breakthrough. They got unstuck from where they were stuck. Then, all right, I'll lower the frequency. You know what? You're on track. How you feeling? Good. Feel like we need this conversation every day, or you feel like you're on track? I really like it, but you know what? I'm cool without it. All right, you can reach out for me. Help. Cool. Let's just talk once a week. And here's what we're going to go through. We're going to just go through those calls, and we're going to go through the signatures. And we'll deep dive on some of them as we go. Maybe not every single one at that point, but when we do, then I'm going to increase. I'm going to increase frequency and lower content. And that is this cadence. And you just play with these 2 dials as a leader. Increase content, lower frequency. Increase frequency, lower content. And be so dialed in. You will help your people break through. They will love you for it. You will be able to lead people more effectively in the moment about what matters most to them. So that is the Science of Execution, part 2, the cadence of accountability, the 2 dials, content and frequency. And as you control those, you're going to make a massive difference for the people you lead and continue to help them leave a legacy. With that, I love you. Thank you for listening, and tune in next week as we continue our leadership journey together. Okay, let me open it up. I'll let you all unmute if you would like. Questions, comments, thoughts, ahas. What goes through your mind as you hear this? What questions do you have? What homework do you give yourself?
I'm curious, Seth, if is there an assumption, or what do you do if it's a skill issue in this? Like, you're working with someone and you're not sure it's skill, because my sense is there's a assumption of an execution or a focus issue? What if it's more than that or something different?
Yeah. Really good question. And the funny part is, as I put this together, that becomes inevitable. And it just wasn't enough time. It was just too much content actually to put into one episode. But truly what happens is, as you go deeper, right? Let's assume it's so you didn't find Mary's pain point, like that comes up, and it's a skill building thing. It's a learning thing. It's a practice thing. Then I'm going to either, depending on how deep it is, I'm going to teach it to you right there, or I'm going to resource you. I'm going to say, you know what? Here's a great class. Here's a great book. Here's a great YouTube video, depending on like how big it is. Or here's a good person for you to go buddy with and shadow and learn how to find that pain point. And then tomorrow or next week, whatever our frequency is, we talk about it, I want to hear what you learned, or even shoot me a text and tell me what you got out of that practice, out of that learning. And then I'm going to frequent follow-up to find out how that went. So when and that, by the way, that's what you want. The challenge is we tend to not go deep enough in that accountability conversation that you kind of leave it at them feeling like a loser sometimes, and us feeling like this isn't good for me either. And it's because I didn't ask you the 6 questions about Mary Smith, because maybe I have too much content to cover, or the frequency isn't there, like these dials are off. And if I don't ask you, tell me what she said, then what happened? Then what'd you say? Then what about that? What was her pain point? What was that? And I should be experienced enough to hear, oh, you know what? You didn't really get her pain point. You know, what else could be? So then I need to identify where your training gap is 100%, and then resource you. And at the end of the day, it's your job to get that training, your job to find it. It's not even necessarily on me to find the perfect resource for you. You want to be resourceful. And yet the worst thing is, I never asked you about Mary Smith. I don't recognize that you didn't find a pain point. All we found out is like your conversion rate is terrible. And then we keep finding out your conversion rate is terrible. And we keep finding out your conversion rate is terrible until you feel like such a loser, you quit, or I say this isn't the right role for you. When really I could have found out about instead of looking at 3 appointments, I could have found 3 names, asked you 5 or 6 questions each, and maybe unstuck you, helped you unstick yourself. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for the training opportunity. The alternative to that is it's a choice not to do. And I'm looking for either one. So you know exactly what to do. You're skilled to do it, and you're choosing not to. All right, what? Then it's time for you to resign. Good question. I hope that answered it. What else?
Yeah, I want to add on there. If my perception is, if you get to that, no, I just don't want to do it, that may actually lead to something really that is going on that requires a conversation. It may not always be just a simple screw you. It may be more, oh, okay, something's going on. And that may actually relieve them of something, that some larger story in the role that doesn't work.
Yeah, it could be a mismatch of role. It could be something going on in life, which happens to, and we want to balance like how flexible can the organization be versus that life event. It's always a balance between those. So if it's like a more permanent thing, or like a choice not to, in terms of, because this isn't my thing, I'm not passionate about it anymore, I'm ready to go be a veterinarian, which I've always wanted to be. Okay, cool. Let's talk about your transition into that. Or, hey, the truth is I got this thing going on at home. It's a struggle. Then we're going to, either way, we're going to make a plan on how to help you through that. And then that opens a whole bunch of other questions. Do you allow the goals to slip while the person goes through something? It's very difficult to answer without specifics. Usually you think about this like the organization, like we talked about before, the organization requires a certain amount of income and goals. Like we owe it to that and to the mission and to everybody else that's tied to that and their families. So I lean towards don't change the goal for a person, but work with the person on how the goal will be hit, even if that involves others. Heck, it might involve the leader covering some of it. Good questions. What other thoughts do you have when you hear this? Content frequency. Have you found yourself sliding off of this? I'm curious, like anybody that feels like sharing, like what's missing? Are you leaning too far in one direction? We do a lot of content and we try to do it too frequent, or we're missing the short burst, highly focused conversation, or we're missing the bigger deep dive strategic conversation. We're missing daily, we're missing weekly, or a daily has too much, or weekly has too much, or it changes.
I got a question. Here's a real world example that Chris and I were talking about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Yeah, you think about 4 conversations, which is intended to be like a daily call. 2 of those are lagging indicators. It seems a little bit out of sync with that.
So it's not actually, 4 conversations actually are not daily. 4 conversations are intended weekly. And then you would do like appointments, and you do the first 2 conversations, appointment signature is daily. So if you did 4 conversations, and you went to daily, you really only should be talking about the first 2. And then once a week, you talk about all 4.
When do you feel like, what if we, and here's another one. Chris, don't think I'm picking on you. I'm just riffing on this conversation that you and I had. Let's go through and let's say, okay, we have the 4 conversations weekly, and then I have the leading indicator conversation every day on just the 2 aspects, which are listings, appointments, and listings taken.
Signatures. Yeah.
Then I find out what's really on fire for you is your buyer side. You seem to be rich with buyer appointments. When do I bring that into the daily conversation? When does something warrant part of the daily conversation?
Well, what would happen is you would have all these zeros. So it'll find its way in there automatically. It'll be, because if you're listing appointments, listings taken, then, and the person is just focused on buyers, then they're gonna be like, I had 0. Or they'll say, oh, I have 4 appointments. Okay, no, listing appointments, 0. Okay, cool. What's your goal? Tomorrow, I want to set a listing appointment. I want to set a listing appointment today, and then you just keep the conversation about that. And then what happens is you'll discover what the issue is. Like they don't do it because they're avoiding it. Or, okay, fine. You don't want to focus on listings at all, then let's have an education about why you should, or how crazy it is to focus on buyer, how out of control that is. However, if that's their choice, then it's just a different thing. We're probably not talking daily. You could, because buyers, by the way, and that might sound crazy. Why would you not talk about buyers daily? Is because in the world of real estate, you don't build a business off buyer sides. It's inconsistent. Now, a person could build a career off that. That's fine. We can talk weekly. Daily, I need to talk about the thing that drives the business. I felt the energy shift and everybody's even on mute. It's like, what? It's blasphemy. You will not.
I meant to say thank you.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. But I felt it from everybody else. But like you won't. And what'll happen is if an organization allows that, before you know it, you're trying to build a large sales team or a large sales organization off of buyer sites. And even if you succeeded at that, you'll lose the business because it is the profit better than anybody, Jeff, the profitability on that versus a listing, et cetera, et cetera. The organization itself starts to lean and focus on that, then you'll slowly put yourself out of business. And it doesn't mean those people are less important or anything like that. It just means like daily we have to talk. It's like, it would be back to flip it to the exercise conversation. Is XYZ super important in health and nutrition? Sure. But if I talk about that every day instead of nutrition or what I ate, I still could lose. I'd win that, but I could lose total. Y'all are very quiet. Anything else? Control the dials. Dial it in. Find your lead indicator. And by the way, so even using the 4 conversations, Jeff, just to take that step further, if we increase, so if we're at daily frequency, then it's first 2 conversations. We may go to the ultra frequency of like hourly or 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, dinner kind of deal. Then it would be just the first conversation. It would be just appointments. And that, because by then, like, you recognize that's this person's challenge.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Our growth partners when I tell you to do that.
Yeah. And well, I mean, that's, and then, and it's really just to help the person like break through their training cycle, their focus cycle. The training cycle by then, it's either it's going to be like a time management thing or something like that, but you help them break through that and then pull back. Thing is, I've met organizations where they're like, oh, we do our 3 time a day check-in. We've been doing that for a year and a half. And I'm like, my heart stops. And like the whole team. And now it's 5 different things they report in. And I'm like, first thing I say is like, how's the attendance? And oh, you know what? It's been really bad. How's the attendance of your top producers? That's really bad. For some reason, they don't show up for that, or they show up for other ones, or they text in there. I was like, yeah, of course. All right. Anybody else? Jeff, were you going to say something else?
No, just for Chris. I think ultimately when the genesis of this was a conversation Chris and I had, it was really more about the balance of the coach's scorecard versus the player scorecard.
Yeah.
But this is kind of an extension of that, right? Where you need a little bit more data on the coach's side than just the 4 conversations from time to time, but it's not appropriate to talk about that in your daily huddle every day. And that's,
right. Or even weekly. Don't resist doing it weekly. And that one is really drives people crazy. Like I live that, like in the 4 conversations world of the creep weekly. And I've allowed it too sometimes, and it's never worked. It's never once did it work. Never. Make a separate weekly conversation about the other thing, or make it every 9 days, 10 days, 14 days, the other stuff. It's so weird in that world where you let something else add in. It could be the slightest thing. It could be, we're going to take conversation 2 and split it between this level producer, or this type of listing, or this type of leader, or buyer, seller. And it's just enough to throw it off. It's uncanny. All right. Love y'all. Have a fantastic week. Thanks, everybody.